The geneticist who first identified the alien DNA match killed her entire research team before taking her own life, leaving behind a manifesto scrawled in symbols that shouldn't have existed in any human language. The decoded message revealed her final discovery. The 3% of human DNA that matched the Antarctic sample wasn't alien at all. It was the only truly human part of our genome, the tiny fragment of our original species genetics that survived when something else took over 97% of our ancestors' DNA millions of years ago. We had it backwards. We weren't mostly human with a little alien mixed in. We were mostly alien wearing human skin, and the 3% was the prison, the last remnant of what we used to be before we were conquered and converted. The ice core sample contained DNA from Earth's original inhabitants, a species that thrived here for billions of years before something from beyond the stars arrived and systematically replaced their genetics while keeping just enough of the original code to ensure the hybrid creatures could survive in Earth's environment. Every human being alive is a descendant of that forced hybridization, carrying within them both the conquered and the conquerors, and the 3% match proves we're not the rightful owners of our own bodies. The classified archaeological findings support this nightmare. Buried beneath Antarctica are cities built by the original Earth species, structures that predate our version of humanity by eons, and scattered throughout those frozen ruins are what appear to be conversion chambers, laboratories where the hybridization process took place. And according to thermal imaging that 7 governments have tried to suppress, something in those laboratories is still active, still running, still converting, as if the original invasion never ended, but simply went dormant, waiting beneath the ice for someone to dig deep enough to wake the conversion machines and let them finish the job they started millions of years ago. I read that manifesto 12 days ago. My name is Elliot Vance, and I'm a glaciologist stationed at McMurdo, though that title feels like a sick joke now. For 11 years, I drilled into ice sheets and pretended I was uncovering Earth's climate history. Noble work, safe work, the kind of job you brag about at Thanksgiving while your brother sells insurance in Columbus. I should have sold insurance in Columbus. The document came through encrypted channels, government servers someone had cracked open like an egg. Whoever leaked it didn't leave a name, just a timestamp. December 3rd, 1999. The same day we pulled core sample 1999 theta from a depth nobody should have reached. I was 24 then, junior member of the drilling team. I remember laughing when the sample came up because the ice looked wrong, too dark, almost purple in certain light. Our team lead, a man named Walter Briggs, told us it was probably volcanic sediment. Walter retired 3 years later. Liver cancer took him in 2008. Except now I'm wondering if it was really cancer at all. The thing about McMurdo Station is that everyone knows everyone's business. 40-odd researchers crammed into prefab buildings while the wind screams bloody murder outside. You learn to read people fast. Who's sleeping with who? Who's drinking too much? Who cries in the shower stalls at 2 a.m. when they think nobody can hear? So when I started pulling old personnel files from the 1999 expedition, people noticed. "You're being weird," Theo Lundgren said, dropping into the chair across from me in the mess hall. He was a geophysicist from Stockholm, built like a refrigerator and twice as cold until you got a few beers in him. We'd shared a bunk room for 3 seasons now. Even for you, Elliot, and that's saying something. I closed my laptop. The screen had been showing a personnel photo of Walter Briggs, younger, fuller in the face, standing next to a drilling rig with his arm around a man I didn't recognize. The timestamp said November 1999. "Research," I said. "At 11 at night? On expedition members from before you had chest hair?" Theo leaned back, arms crossed. "Come on, what's going on?" I wanted to tell him. God, I wanted to show him the manifesto and watch his face cycle through the same stages mine had. Disbelief, horror, that creeping paranoia that settles into your bones like frostbite. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, slightly off rhythm, like a heartbeat with an extra syllable. "You remember the 1999 core sample?" I asked instead. "Theta?" Theo's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went still. "Before my time. Why?" "I was on that team. Junior position. We pulled something up from about 4,000 meters, way deeper than we should have been drilling. The ice looked off, purple, almost, like a bruise. Volcanic sediment, Theo said automatically. That's what Briggs said. I watched his face carefully. Funny thing is, I can't find any analysis reports for that sample, nothing in the database, nothing in the physical archives. It's like we never pulled it up at all. Theo was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows in their frames. Someone in the kitchen dropped a pan, and the clatter made us both flinch. Maybe it got misfiled, he said finally. You know how things were back then. Half the records were still on paper. Maybe. I didn't believe it, neither did he. I could see it in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. The manifesto kept scrolling through my head. Those impossible symbols burned into my memory, like after images from staring at the sun. The geneticist, her name was Dr. Eleanor Voss, though the leaked documents had redacted it poorly, had drawn them in her own blood across 17 pages of legal paper. The translation team had taken 6 months to decode them, and 3 of the translators had requested immediate psychiatric leave afterward. The message was simple once you stripped away the horror: we are not what we think we are. I got up around 3 in the morning and walked to the storage facility. McMurdo's archives were housed in a converted supply building near the helicopter pad, rows of metal shelving stacked with boxes dating back to the 1950s. Most researchers never bothered with physical records anymore. Everything important had been digitized years ago. But core sample 1999 theta had never been digitized. I was sure of that now. The lock on the archive door was broken. Not obviously. You had to look close to see the scratches around the keyhole, the slight warping of the metal where someone had forced it. Recently, too. The scratches were still bright, not yet dulled by oxidation. Inside, the air tasted wrong. Stale, yes, but something else underneath it. A sweetness that reminded me of rotting fruit, or the way a hospital room smells when someone's been dying in it for too long. I found the 1999 section easily enough. Boxes labelled by month and expedition number, everything in its proper place, except for one gap. November 1999. Boxes for weeks 1, 2, and 4 were present. Week 3, the week we'd pulled theta, was missing. In its place was a rectangle of dust, slightly darker than the surrounding shelf, marking where something had sat undisturbed for decades before being removed. I stood there for a long time staring at that empty space. Someone had taken it. Someone who knew what we'd found, who understood what it meant. And they'd done it recently, within the last few days, judging by the fresh scratches on the lock. My hands were shaking when I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course. McMurdo's satellite connection was garbage at the best of times, and this deep in the building, I might as well have been on the moon. I turned to leave. That's when I saw the photograph. It had fallen behind one of the remaining boxes, probably dislodged when whoever took the files was rushing. A Polaroid, edges yellowed with age. The image showed the drilling site from 1999. I recognized the equipment, the configuration of the tents, but it was the figure in the background that made me stop breathing. A man standing maybe 50 meters from the main camp, tall, too tall, proportions slightly wrong in a way I couldn't immediately articulate. He was facing the camera, but where his face should have been, there was only a smear of darkness, like the film had been exposed to something that light couldn't capture properly. On the back of the Polaroid, someone had written 2 words in handwriting I recognized as Walter Briggs. He watched. I pocketed the photograph and ran. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. The Polaroid sat in my desk drawer like a tumor, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smeared face, or rather, the absence of one. My brain kept trying to fill in the details, constructing features from memory and imagination, but nothing stuck. It was like trying to remember a dream that dissolves the moment you reach for it. On the 3rd day, Theo cornered me outside the geology lab. "You look like hell," he said, and there was genuine concern beneath the gruffness. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't coffee?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're scaring people, Elliot. Henderson said you were in the server room at 4 in the morning. trying to access restricted files. I stiffened. Henderson was the station's IT administrator, a quiet guy from Portland who mostly kept to himself. I hadn't realized anyone had seen me. I was doing research, I said. Research on what? Because I asked around and nobody knows what project you're supposedly working on. The department head thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. The wind cut between the buildings, carrying ice crystals that stung my exposed cheeks. I pulled my collar tighter and made a decision. Come with me, I said. I need to show you something. We walked to my quarters in silence. The station was quiet at this hour. Most researchers were either in the labs or catching sleep before the next shift. I locked the door behind us and pulled the Polaroid from my desk. Theo studied it for a long time. His expression didn't change, but I watched the colour drain from his face, leaving him pale beneath his Nordic tan. What am I looking at? He asked finally. The 1999 drilling site. That's our camp in the foreground, and that... I pointed to the figure in the background. That was watching us. The face is damaged. Could be a development error. Old Polaroids did that sometimes. Look at the proportions, Theo, the arms, the way it's standing. He looked. I watched his jaw tighten. This could be anything, he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. A trick of the light. Pareidolia. Walter Briggs wrote on the back. He saw it too. And now Walter's dead. The files from that week are missing, and someone broke into the archives within the last few days to take them. I pulled up the manifesto on my laptop, scrolling to the section about the Antarctic excavation. Read this. Theo read. I watched his eyes move across the screen, watched him stop breathing for a moment when he reached the part about the conversion chambers. When he finished, he sat down heavily on my bunk, hands trembling slightly. This is insane, he whispered. I know. This is absolutely bloody insane, Elliot. You're telling me that that humanity, isn't human, not really, not the way we thought. I sat down beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. The contact felt grounding, necessary. The 3% match isn't contamination. It's what's left of the original species. We're the contamination. Theo was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that had no humour in it. Okay, he said. Say I believe you. Say this manifesto is real and not some elaborate hoax. What do you want to do about it? I want to find the sample, theta, someone knows where it is. And then what? Publish? Go to the press? You'll be laughed out of every academic institution on the planet. I don't care about my career anymore. The words came out harder than I intended. I care about knowing. Don't you? If everything we think we know about ourselves is a lie, don't you want to understand why? Theo met my eyes. There was something in his gaze I couldn't quite read. Fear, yes, but also a flicker of that same hunger that had been eating at me since I first read the manifesto. The need to know, even if the knowing destroyed you. There's a restricted server, he said slowly. Military grade. The Americans installed it back in 2015 for some joint research project that never went anywhere. Most people don't even know it exists, but I helped with the initial setup. The access codes might still work. Where is it? Sub-level 2, under the main research building. He stood up, rolling his shoulders like he was preparing for a fight. If we're going to do this, we do it now. Night shift starts in an hour, and there'll be fewer people around. We move through the station like ghosts, avoiding the main corridors and using service passages that most researchers never bothered with. The cold intensified as we descended. Sub-level 2 wasn't heated the same way as the surface buildings, and our breath came out in pale clouds that hung in the air. The server room was behind a reinforced door marked with warnings in 3 languages. Theo punched in a code, and for a horrible moment, nothing happened. Then the lock clicked, and we were in. The room was smaller than I expected, dominated by 3 black server towers that hummed with a low, almost subsonic vibration I could feel in my back teeth. Theo moved to a terminal in the corner and began typing. I'm in, he said after a few minutes. But there's heavy encryption on most of these files. Give me a second. I waited, watching the screen fill with directories and subdirectories. Most of the file names were alphanumeric codes that meant nothing to me, but one folder caught my eye. Project Threshold, dated 1999 to 2003. There, I said, pointing. Theo opened the folder. Inside were dozens of documents, image files, and what looked like video recordings. The first document was a summary report, and as Theo scrolled through it, I felt the floor shift beneath me. The report confirmed everything in the manifesto and added details that made the horror worse. Core sample, 1999. Theta hadn't just contained unusual ice. It had contained biological material, preserved in a state that shouldn't have been possible. Cells that were still metabolically active after millions of years, protected by the sub-zero temperatures from decay, but somehow not killed by them either. The sample had been transferred to a facility in Nevada for further study. 3 researchers had died during the analysis, causes listed as cardiac arrest, stroke, and suicide. The project had been shut down in 2003 after an incident that the report described only as unforeseen biological response. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the thermal imaging data from the original excavation site. I stared at the images, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Beneath the ice, at a depth of nearly 5 kilometers, there were heat signatures, dozens of them, arranged in geometric patterns that could not possibly be natural, and one of them was moving. "Theo," I said, my voice strange in my own ears. "Look at the timestamp on this image." He looked. The timestamp read, December 1st, 3 days ago. "That's impossible," he breathed. "This is real-time data. The satellites are still watching. The Americans know something's down there, and they've known for years." Before I could respond, the lights in the server room went out. In the darkness, I heard Theo's breathing rapid and harsh. I heard the hum of the servers, unchanged. And I heard something else. Footsteps in the corridor outside, moving toward us with purpose. The door handle began to turn. The door swung open and a flashlight beam cut through the darkness like a scalpel. "Don't move." The voice belonged to a man I didn't recognize. American accent, clipped and professional. Behind him I could make out 2 more figures in the corridor, their silhouettes bulky with cold weather gear. "Hands where I can see them," the man continued. "Both of you, now." We complied. There wasn't much choice. The flashlight moved from my face to Theo's, then swept across the server terminal where the thermal imaging data still glowed on the screen. "Damn it," the man muttered. He stepped into the room and I got my first clear look at him. Late 40s, grey at the temples, the kind of weathered face that comes from too many years in hostile environments. No uniform, but the way he carried himself screamed military. "How much did you access?" "Enough," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Project Threshold, the Nevada facility, the thermal imaging." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, more like resignation, the look of a man who'd been dreading this moment for a long time. "My name is Colonel James Whitford," he said, "and you two just made my job significantly more complicated." They took us to a section of McMurdo I'd never seen before, a subsurface facility accessed through a freight elevator hidden behind a false wall in the supply depot. The architecture was different down here, newer and more deliberately designed. This wasn't converted storage space. This had been built with purpose. Whitford led us to a small conference room with no windows and a single metal table bolted to the floor. His 2 companions, soldiers I was certain now, stationed themselves outside the door. "Sit," Whitford said, gesturing to the chairs. We sat. Theo's face had gone blank, the way it did when he was processing something he didn't want to accept. I could feel the Polaroid in my pocket, pressing against my thigh like a secret. "Let me be clear about something," Whitford began, settling into the chair across from us. "You are not in trouble, not yet. What happens next depends entirely on the choices you make in the next few minutes." "Who are you?" Theo asked. "Really?" "I told you. Colonel James Whitford, United States Army, attached to a joint international task force that officially doesn't exist." He smiled without humor. "We've been monitoring the situation in Antarctica since 1999. Your little excavation that year wasn't the first time someone dug too deep, but it was the first time we got a viable sample." "The manifesto," I said. "Dr. Voss. Was any of it true?" Whitford's smile faded. Eleanor Voss was a brilliant geneticist. She was also mentally unstable, a condition that the sample's analysis appears to have exacerbated. Her conclusions were partially correct, but her interpretation was compromised by her deteriorating psychological state. "Partially correct," I repeated. "Which part?" For a long moment, Whitford didn't answer. He studied us with eyes that had seen things I couldn't imagine, weighing something in his mind. "The 3% match is real," he said finally. "We've verified it independently, multiple times, across different populations. Every human being on Earth carries genetic material that is identical to sequences found in the Antarctic sample." Theo made a sound beside me, half laugh, half sob. "So we are… what? Hybrids?" "That's one interpretation. Dr. Voss believed that our species was conquered, our original genetics overwritten by something extraterrestrial. But there are other possibilities: cross-contamination during Earth's formation, parallel evolution, panspermia." Whitford shrugged. "The truth is, we don't know. We've had 25 years to study this, and we still don't know." "The thermal signatures," I said. "The geometric patterns under the ice. The one that was moving." Whitford's expression tightened. "That's classified." "Classified? We saw the data. Something is alive down there." "Something is active," Whitford corrected. "Whether it qualifies as alive is a matter of considerable debate among people with far more expertise than either of you possess." He stood up, moving to a small cabinet against the wall. From inside, he withdrew a bottle of whiskey and 3 glasses. "Good stuff," I noted distantly. "Single malt." He poured 3 fingers into each glass and slid 2 across the table toward us. "Drink," he said. "You're going to need it." I took a sip. The whiskey burned going down, but it helped steady my nerves. Beside me, Theo drained half his glass in one swallow. "In 1999, your team pulled up something that should have stayed buried," Whitford continued, settling back into his chair. "The sample was transferred to a secure facility for analysis. 3 researchers died during that process, not from the causes listed in the official reports, but from exposure to something we still don't fully understand. A frequency, for lack of a better term. The cells in that sample emit a subsonic vibration that appears to affect human neurology in unpredictable ways." "The suicide," I said, remembering the report. "Dr. Voss wasn't the first." "No, she wasn't." Whitford took a long drink from his own glass. "The frequency causes different reactions in different people. Some experience paranoia, hallucinations. Others become convinced that they've received some kind of revelation, a message from whatever intelligence created the original material. A few simply stop. Their higher brain functions shut down, leaving them in a vegetative state." "Walter Briggs," I said. "He was on the original drilling team. He died of cancer in 2008. Something flickered across Whitford's face. "Walter Briggs was exposed to the sample for approximately 6 minutes during the initial extraction. He began exhibiting symptoms within a week: headaches, vivid dreams, an obsessive focus on geometric patterns. We monitored him for years, but he never progressed beyond the initial stages." "You monitored him? He was a private citizen. He had a family." "He was a potential vector for something we didn't understand, still don't." Whitford's voice was flat, unapologetic. "We do what's necessary, Mr. Vance. That's the job." I thought about Walter, his easy laugh, the way he'd clapped me on the shoulder after my first successful drill. The photograph on my desk back in the world, me and him standing in front of the research station, grinning like idiots. "What happened to the sample?" Theo asked. His voice was hoarse. "After the Nevada facility shut down?" Whitford hesitated. It was brief, barely a heartbeat, but I caught it. "The sample was destroyed," he said. "Standard decontamination protocols." He was lying. I knew it with a certainty that went beyond logic, settling into my bones like the Antarctic cold. The sample wasn't destroyed. It was somewhere, still active, still emitting that frequency. And Whitford knew exactly where. Before I could press further, an alarm began to wail, a deep, pulsing tone that vibrated through the walls and into my chest. Whitford was on his feet instantly, his face draining of colour. "Stay here," he snapped, moving toward the door. "What's happening?" I demanded. He paused at the threshold, and when he turned back, there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear, raw and undisguised. "The thermal signature," he said. "The one that was moving. It stopped 2 hours ago." He swallowed hard. "It just started again, and it's heading toward the surface." Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him. Theo and I sat in silence, the alarm howling around us. I could feel my pulse in my temples, my throat, the tips of my fingers. The whiskey glass trembled slightly in my grip. "We need to get out of here," Theo said. "And go where? We're in the middle of Antarctica." "Anywhere. Away from whatever's coming up." I thought about the Polaroid in my pocket, the smeared face, Walter's handwriting. He watched. "It's been watching us for a long time," I said quietly. "Maybe it's always been watching, and now it knows we're looking back." The lights overhead began to flicker, not randomly, but in a pattern. 3 short pulses, then a long one, then 3 short again. Over and over, like a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. Theo grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "Elliot, we need to move. Now." We ran. The corridor outside was empty, but I could hear shouting in the distance, orders being barked, equipment being moved. We followed the sounds away from them, deeper into the facility, searching for another way out. Behind us, the flickering lights continued their countdown, and somewhere far below, beneath 5 kilometers of ancient ice, something that had been sleeping for millions of years was finally waking up. We found a service hatch 3 levels up, an emergency exit that led to a maintenance tunnel running beneath the main research building. The tunnel was cramped, freezing, and dark except for the pale glow of emergency lighting every 20 meters. But it was empty, and right now, empty was all I wanted. Theo collapsed against the tunnel wall, breathing hard. His face was slick with sweat despite the cold, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "This is insane," he muttered. "This is completely insane." "You said that already. It bears repeating." He laughed, a thin and desperate sound. 24 hours ago, I was worried about my funding proposal. Now I'm running through tunnels because something prehistoric is clawing its way up from under the ice." I slid down the wall beside him, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. We sat there in silence for a while, listening to the distant wail of alarms and the groaning of pipes overhead. "Whitford was lying," I said finally, "about the sample being destroyed. Obviously. So where is it? If they've been studying it for 25 years, they must have it stored somewhere. A facility. A lab." "Does it matter?" Theo's voice was harsh. "Something's coming up, Elliot. Something that's been down there for millions of years. You think finding a sample is going to help us?" I pulled the Polaroid from my pocket and stared at the smeared figure in the background. The proportions still looked wrong, but now I noticed something else. The angle of the shadows didn't match. Everything else in the photograph cast shadows to the east, consistent with the Antarctic sun's position. But the figure cast no shadow at all. "The manifesto said there were conversion chambers," I said slowly. "Laboratories where the hybridization happened. What if the thing coming up isn't trying to attack us? What else would it be doing? What if it's coming to finish the job?" Theo stared at me. The emergency lighting caught his eyes, turning them into pale coins. "The 3%, he said. "The original human genetics that survived the conversion." "Exactly. Dr. Voss thought it was a prison, the last remnant of what we used to be, trapped inside bodies that were 97% something else. But what if she was wrong about that too? What if the 3% isn't a remnant? I swallowed hard. What if it's a malfunction? Something that wasn't supposed to survive the conversion process, but did. You're saying we're incomplete? I'm saying maybe there's a reason the conversion chambers are still active. Maybe whatever's down there has been waiting for us to dig deep enough to trigger some kind of failsafe. A second wave of conversion to correct the error. The tunnel shuddered, not violently, just a subtle vibration that I felt more in my bones than my body. But it was enough to send a fresh spike of adrenaline through my veins. We need to find Whitford, Theo said, pushing himself to his feet. Whatever's happening, he knows more than he told us. And if there's a way to stop this, you think he's going to help us? He was ready to lock us in that room and forget we existed. Then we make him help us. Theo's jaw was set, his earlier fear hardening into something colder. I didn't spend 15 years of my life studying the ice just to become raw material for some alien conversion process. We followed the maintenance tunnel to its terminus, a ladder leading up to a hatch marked with faded Cyrillic lettering. Soviet-era construction, probably left over from the Cold War research exchanges. The hatch opened into a storage room stacked with crates of decommissioned equipment. From there, we made our way toward the main research building, moving carefully through corridors that should have been bustling with activity, but were instead eerily deserted. The alarms had stopped at some point, I wasn't sure when, and the silence was somehow worse. We found Whitford in the communications center, hunched over a console with a headset pressed to one ear. 2 of his soldiers stood nearby, their weapons drawn and pointed at nothing in particular. They all looked terrified. "Repeat. We have confirmed movement at 4,000 meters and rising," Whitford was saying into the headset. "Estimated surface breach in 6 hours. Requesting immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. Do you copy?" The response was garbled, mostly static, with fragments of words breaking through. Whitford's face went grey. "Negative, we cannot contain. I repeat, containment is not possible. This is beyond..." He stopped mid-sentence, noticing us in the doorway. "How the hell did you get here?" "The maintenance tunnels." I stepped into the room, hands raised to show I wasn't a threat. "We need to talk." "I don't have time for this." "Make time, because I think I know what's coming, and I think you do too." Whitford stared at me for a long moment. Then he pulled off the headset and tossed it onto the console. 6 hours, he said. "That's how long we have before that thing reaches the surface. My superiors are debating whether to evacuate or sterilize the entire site with tactical weapons. Either way, we're all dead or displaced by morning. Unless we can stop it." "Stop it?" Whitford laughed bitterly. "With what? This isn't a military threat, Mr. Vance. This is something that rewrote our entire species' genetic code millions of years ago. You can't shoot it. You can't bomb it. The best we can do is run and hope it doesn't follow." "The sample," I pressed. "The one you said was destroyed, where is it really?" Something shifted in Whitford's expression, a crack in his professional facade. "Sub-level 4, he said quietly. "There's a containment unit. The sample has been there since 2003, kept in cryogenic suspension to prevent the frequency from spreading. We thought if we could study it long enough, we'd find a weakness, something to exploit." "And did you?" Whitford shook his head slowly. "We found the opposite. The more we studied it, the more we realized how perfectly designed it was. The conversion process isn't just genetic, it's neurological, behavioral, cultural. It didn't just change what our ancestors were, it changed how they thought, what they believed, how they organized their societies. Everything we consider fundamentally human, language, art, religion, might just be programming. Subroutines installed to make the hybrid species easier to manage." The words settled over me like a shroud. I thought about music, about love, about the way a sunset could make your chest ache with beauty you couldn't explain. Were those real feelings, or just biological responses engineered by something that saw us as raw material? "There has to be something," Theo said. His voice was steady, but I could see the whites of his eyes. "Some way to fight back." Whitford was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small metal cylinder, no bigger than a pen. "This was recovered from the Nevada facility before it was shut down," he said. "One of the researchers, before he died, theorized that the 3% might be more than just leftover genetics. It might be a key, a way to interface with the original conversion technology." "Interface how?" "We don't know. The researcher died before he could finish his work." Whitford held out the cylinder. "But if you're right about what's coming, if this is a second wave of conversion, then someone with the right genetic profile might be able to access the control systems, might be able to shut it down from the inside." I stared at the cylinder in his hand. It was cold and smooth and utterly alien, and touching it felt like reaching for a loaded gun. "Why are you giving this to me?" Whitford smiled thinly. "Because according to our records, you have the highest concentration of original human genetics we've ever documented. 96% conversion rate instead of the standard 97. You're 1% more human than the rest of us, Mr. Vance." He pressed the cylinder into my palm. "Let's hope that's enough." The elevator to sub-level 4 was industrial and slow, groaning with each meter of descent. Whitford had given us keycards and a security escort, a young soldier named Brennan, who looked barely old enough to shave and kept his rifle pointed at the floor like he wasn't sure what to do with it. Theo stood beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed with each shudder of the elevator car. Neither of us had spoken since leaving the communications center. The cylinder sat heavy in my jacket pocket, a constant reminder of what I was supposedly meant to do. "You don't have to come," I said quietly. "Shut up." "I mean it. Whatever's down there." I said shut up. Theo's voice was rough, but when I looked at him, his eyes were wet. "I'm not letting you do this alone, so just shut up and let me be here." I didn't have words for what I felt in that moment: gratitude, fear, something warmer that I didn't have time to examine. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his arm, just above the elbow. He leaned into the touch, briefly, and then the elevator shuddered to a stop. The doors opened onto a corridor that looked nothing like the rest of McMurdo. The walls were smooth and white, almost organic in their curves, lit by recessed panels that cast no shadows. The air tasted different down here, cleaner, but with an undertone of something chemical I couldn't identify. "This way," Brennan said, leading us forward. His voice echoed strangely off the curved surfaces. We passed through 3 security checkpoints, each one requiring retinal scans and biometric verification. The deeper we went, the more I noticed the vibration. Subtle at first, like standing near a generator, but growing stronger with each step until I could feel it in my molars. "The frequency," I said. "We're getting close to the sample." Brennan nodded without turning around. "Containment is just ahead. Try not to look directly at it for more than a few seconds at a time. Some people get nosebleeds, others get worse." The containment chamber was a circular room dominated by a cylindrical tank in the center, filled with pale blue liquid that seemed to glow from within. Suspended in the liquid was the sample, a mass of tissue about the size of a human heart, dark purple and shot through with veins of something that caught the light like metal. I'd expected something alien. What I hadn't expected was the sense of recognition that washed over me when I saw it, a feeling of coming home to a place I'd never been. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Brennan's voice came from behind me, and something in his tone made the hair on my neck stand up. I turned slowly. Brennan had his rifle raised, pointed directly at my chest. His face was calm, almost serene, and his eyes had taken on a distant quality that I recognized from Whitford's description of the frequency's effects. "Brennan," Theo said carefully, "put the gun down." "I can't do that." Brennan smiled, a peaceful, beatific expression that was somehow more terrifying than rage. "I've been listening, you see, ever since I was assigned to this facility. The sample speaks if you know how to hear it. And it's been telling me about you, Mr. Vance, about what you really are." "And what's that?" "A mistake, a glitch in the conversion process, something that was supposed to be corrected millions of years ago, but somehow slipped through." Brennan's finger tightened on the trigger. "The awakening will fix everything, complete the conversion, make us whole. But you might be able to stop it. The sample is afraid of you." The sample doesn't feel fear, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. Everything feels fear, Mr. Vance, even gods. Brennan tilted his head, listening to something I couldn't hear. It wants me to kill you, but it also wants to know how you exist. A contradiction. Fascinating. Theo moved before I could stop him, lunging forward with a speed I wouldn't have expected from someone his size. He caught Brennan's rifle barrel and shoved it upward, just as the shot rang out, the bullet sparking off the ceiling. They grappled, stumbling against the containment tank, and I heard Theo grunt in pain as Brennan drove an elbow into his ribs. I pulled the cylinder from my pocket without thinking. It was warm now, pulsing gently against my palm, and when I pointed it at Brennan, something happened that I still can't fully explain. The air between us became visible, strands of light connecting me to the cylinder, to the sample, to Brennan, a web of luminous threads that seemed to exist just slightly outside normal space. Brennan screamed, releasing Theo and clutching at his head. The threads contracted, pulling tight, and then Brennan collapsed, not dead but emptied somehow, his eyes open and staring at nothing. The threads dissolved, leaving after images that faded slowly from my vision. "What the hell was that?" Theo gasped, pressing a hand to his side. I stared at the cylinder. It had gone cold again, inert. "I don't know. I just pointed it and..." "Later. We can figure it out later." Theo pulled himself upright, wincing. "The sample. Can you access it?" The containment tank hummed beside us, the purple tissue floating in its blue suspension. Up close, I could see that it wasn't a single mass, but thousands of smaller structures woven together, each one a perfect geometric shape that repeated at every scale. Fractals. The entire thing was made of fractals. I pressed my palm against the tank's surface. The world inverted. There's no other way to describe it. One moment I was standing in the containment chamber. The next, I was somewhere else entirely. A vast space that wasn't quite darkness and wasn't quite light, filled with geometric forms that shifted and recombined in patterns my brain struggled to process. And I wasn't alone. Something was there with me. Not a shape or a presence in the conventional sense, but an awareness, vast and ancient and utterly inhuman. It regarded me with something that might have been curiosity, or hunger, or both. "You are incomplete." The words didn't come through my ears, they formed directly in my mind, each syllable carrying weight and meaning beyond its surface content. "So I've been told," I said, or thought. It was hard to tell the difference. The process was interrupted. "Your ancestors resisted longer than expected. The 3% is contamination, original substrate that should have been overwritten." "Is that why you're coming up, to finish the conversion?" "But conversion is not punishment. Conversion is elevation. Your species was dying, scattered, purposeless, consuming itself. We offered unity, direction, survival. You offered slavery. The awareness shifted, and I felt something that might have been amusement. You use words without understanding them. Slavery implies a master and a servant. We are not your masters. We are your future. Your children will thank us, as your ancestors should have." The geometric forms around me began to close in, each one a face of the same impossible shape, pressing against the boundaries of my perception. I could feel them trying to get inside, not violently, but with the patient inevitability of water finding cracks in stone. The cylinder you carry is a key. It was designed to allow interface between converted and unconverted biology. But you are neither. You are something we did not anticipate. "Then let me go. If I'm not what you want..." "We did not say you were not what we want." The awareness pressed closer, and I felt something like fingers brushing against the inside of my skull. "You are unique. A bridge between what was and what will be. You could be more than human, more than us. You could be the first of something new." For a moment, just a moment, I considered it. The offer hung in the space between us, shimmering with possibility, evolution, transcendence, an end to the confusion and fear and smallness of being merely human. Then I thought of Theo's hand on my arm, Walter's photograph, the smell of coffee in the McMurdo mess hall on a winter morning. "No," I said. The awareness recoiled, not in pain but in something like surprise. "You refuse elevation? I refuse you." I gripped the cylinder tighter and felt it respond, warmth spreading up my arm, into my chest, suffusing my entire body with light that pushed back against the geometric shapes pressing in on me. "Whatever I am, whatever the 3% means, it's mine, not yours. You don't get to decide what we become." The awareness was silent for a long moment. Then, "Very well, you have chosen your path. But understand, the awakening cannot be stopped, only redirected. You may close one door, but another will open. This is the nature of conversion." The geometric space shattered around me, and I was back in the containment chamber gasping for breath. The tank in front of me was cracked, blue liquid pooling on the floor. The sample itself had changed. The purple tissue now shot through with threads of gold that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Elliot!" Theo was beside me, his hands on my shoulders, his face inches from mine. "Elliot, can you hear me?" "I'm okay," I managed. "I think. Something happened. I talked to it. To them." The floor shuddered violently. Somewhere above us I heard a sound like thunder, or like ice breaking. "It's still coming," I said. "I couldn't stop it, but I think I changed something. The sample..." I looked at the tank. The golden threads were spreading through the tissue, consuming the purple, transforming it into something different, something that felt less like an invasion and more like a negotiation. "We need to move." Theo hauled me upright, half carrying me toward the door. "Whatever you did, we can figure it out topside. Right now, we need to get out of here before this whole level collapses." We ran. Behind us, the containment chamber groaned and buckled, the ceiling beginning to cave. Brennan was still lying where he'd fallen. There was no time to check if he was alive. The elevator was waiting, doors open like a mouth. We threw ourselves inside and Theo slammed the emergency ascent button. The car lurched upward faster than it had descended, racing against the rumbling that chased us from below. "What did you see?" Theo asked. His face was pale, streaked with sweat and dust. "In there, when you touched the tank." I thought about the awareness, the offer, the choice I'd made. "I saw what we could become," I said, and I told it no. The elevator shuddered, and somewhere far beneath us, something ancient and vast continued its climb toward the surface. Changed now, altered by whatever I'd done in that moment of contact. I just hoped it was enough. The elevator deposited us in chaos. The main level of McMurdo had transformed into something between an evacuation zone and a war room. Soldiers ran past carrying equipment I didn't recognize, their faces tight with controlled panic. Researchers huddled in corners, some crying, others staring at nothing with the blank expressions of people whose worldview had shattered beyond repair. Whitford found us before we could find him. His uniform was disheveled, his grey hair wild, and there was blood on his collar from a cut on his cheek. "You're alive," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "Brennan?" "Down," I said. "The sample. Something happened. I made contact." "We know. The thermal readings went haywire about 10 minutes ago. The signature changed. It's still rising, but the pattern is different now. More." He struggled for the word. "Organized." "Is that good or bad?" "I have no idea." Whitford grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the communications center. "But we've got bigger problems. Satellite imaging shows the ice sheet above the excavation site is destabilizing. Whatever's coming up is generating enough heat to melt through from below. We're looking at a surface breach in less than 2 hours now, not 6. The communications center was crowded with personnel, all of them focused on screens showing data I couldn't interpret. Whitford led us to a corner where a holographic display projected a 3-dimensional map of the ice sheet, the thermal signature visible as a pulsing red mass deep beneath the surface. "Here's what we know," Whitford said, pointing to the display. "The signature is approximately 800 meters in diameter and rising at a rate of roughly 40 meters per minute. At this speed, it'll break through somewhere in this zone." He traced a circle on the map. "About 3 kilometers from the main station." "Evacuation?" Theo asked. Already underway, but we can't get everyone out in time. The weather's turning and half our aircraft are grounded. Best case scenario, we save maybe 60% of personnel. I stared at the pulsing red mass. It looked almost organic now, the edges shifting and reforming in ways that reminded me of the geometric shapes I'd seen in my vision. The cylinder, I said slowly. When I used it on Brennan, it created some kind of connection. A network. I could see threads linking everything together. Whitford's eyes sharpened. What kind of threads? Light, energy. I don't know how to describe it, but when I pulled on them, Brennan collapsed, like I'd disconnected him from something. The frequency, Theo said. The sample's signal. Maybe the cylinder can disrupt it on a larger scale. That's a hell of a maybe, Whitford said. We're talking about something that's been operating for millions of years. A device we barely understand, used by someone who's never trained with it. Do you have a better option? The silence that followed was answer enough. I walked away from the display, needing space to think. My body ached with exhaustion, and my head throbbed with echoes of the contact I'd made in the containment chamber. The awareness was still there, I realized. A faint presence at the edge of my consciousness, watching and waiting. Theo followed me to the window. Outside, the Antarctic darkness was absolute, broken only by the station's exterior lights and the distant glow of vehicle headlamps as the evacuation proceeded. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We've had this conversation." "I know, but I need to say it again." He moved closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Whatever happens out there, you've already done more than anyone could ask. If you want to get on one of those aircraft and leave this to someone else, I'll be right there with you." I turned to face him. In the dim light of the communications center, his features were softened, the hard Nordic angles made gentle by shadow. There was something in his expression I hadn't let myself see before, or maybe hadn't wanted to see because acknowledging it would make everything more complicated. "My father left when I was 7, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Just walked out one morning and never came back. My mother told me he'd gone to find something important, something that would make sense of everything. I spent years hating him for that, for choosing the mystery over us. Elliot, but I understand now. I understand what it's like to have something so big in front of you that you can't look away, even when looking might destroy you." I reached up and touched his face, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm not my father. I'm not leaving because I want to escape. I'm going because if I don't, there won't be anything left to come back to." Theo closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were bright with something he was too proud to let fall. "Then I'm coming with you." "No, this isn't negotiable." Theo dash. "I said it's not negotiable." His hand caught mine, pressing it harder against his cheek. "You need someone to watch your back, someone who can pull you out if things go wrong. And I need..." His voice cracked. "I need to be there, whatever happens. Do you understand?" I understood. God help me, I understood perfectly. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." We stood there for a moment longer, foreheads almost touching, breathing the same air. Then Whitford's voice cut through the silence. "Vance, we've got a problem." The problem was the cylinder. According to the technicians who'd been studying it for the past hour, the device was designed to interface with specific genetic markers that were concentrated in the 3% of unconverted DNA. Using it required drawing on that genetic material directly, essentially burning through the original human substrate to power the connection. "How much?" I asked. The lead technician, a nervous man named Aldrich with thick glasses and a tremor in his hands, consulted his tablet. "We can't be certain without proper testing, but based on the energy signatures from your encounter with Brennan, I'd estimate each major use costs approximately 0.2% of your original genetic material." "Costs how?" "The cells die permanently. They're replaced by converted tissue." Aldrich's voice was clinical, detached in the way of someone delivering news too terrible to engage with emotionally. You have roughly 4% more original substrate than the average human. That gives you maybe 20 significant uses before you're down to baseline. After that, he shrugged, you'd be like everyone else. The connection would be lost. And if I use it all at once, everything I have in one burst? Aldrich went pale. Theoretically, it might generate enough power to disrupt the entire awakening, create a feedback loop that shorts out the conversion signal. He paused. It would also almost certainly kill you. The shock to your system would be catastrophic. Theo's hand tightened on my shoulder. No, absolutely not. I'm not planning to martyr myself, I said, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. But I need to know my options. Whitford appeared beside us, a tactical vest strapped over his uniform and a radio in his hand. The transport is ready. We've got a modified snow vehicle that can get you within 500 meters of the projected breach site. After that, you're on foot. What's the plan once we get there? Improvise. Whitford's smile was grim. Find the source of the signal. Use the cylinder to disrupt it. Try not to die. Inspiring. I never said I was good at speeches. He handed me the radio. Channel 7. I'll be monitoring from here, coordinating what's left of our forces. If you need extraction, I'll call. We suited up in silence. Thermal gear, emergency supplies, the cylinder secured in a reinforced case strapped to my chest. Theo moved beside me with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years preparing for hostile environments, his hands steady even as his jaw remained tight. The snow vehicle was waiting outside, engines idling, exhaust rising in white plumes against the darkness. The driver was another soldier, older than Brennan, with a face that suggested he'd seen enough not to be surprised by anything. 90 minutes to breach, he said as we climbed in. Maybe less if the melt rate accelerates. The vehicle lurched forward, headlights cutting through the darkness as we headed toward the coordinates Whitford had provided. Through the window, I watched McMurdo's lights grow smaller behind us until the station was just a faint glow on the horizon. Ahead, there was only darkness and ice. And somewhere beneath it, something that had been waiting for millions of years was finally about to emerge. I touched the case on my chest, feeling the cylinder's faint warmth through the reinforced material. Whatever was coming, I was going to meet it head-on. I just hoped I had enough left to give. The ice was screaming. That's the only way I can describe it. A high, keening sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the vehicle's frame and into my bones. The driver had stopped talking 20 minutes ago, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he navigated terrain that was actively trying to kill us. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface ahead, some of them glowing faintly from below with light that shouldn't exist. Steam rose from the larger fissures, turning the air into a fog that our headlights barely penetrated. 500 meters, the driver announced, his voice tight. This is as close as I can get. The surface won't hold the vehicle's weight beyond this point. Theo and I climbed out into wind that cut through our thermal gear like it wasn't there. The cold was immediate and absolute, settling into every exposed inch of skin with predatory efficiency. Radio check, I said into the handset. Whitford's voice crackled back, distorted by distance and interference. Reading you, Vance. Thermal shows the signature about 400 meters north of your position. It's close to the surface now. Minutes, not hours. Copy. We moved across the ice on foot, picking our way between the cracks. The glow from below intensified as we approached, shifting through colors that had no names. Not quite blue, not quite gold, something that existed in the spaces between. The cylinder was warm against my chest, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I could feel the connection now, a thread of awareness linking me to whatever was rising beneath us. It knew I was coming. It was waiting. There, Theo said, pointing. Ahead, the ice had buckled upward into a dome roughly 50 meters across. The surface was thin here, translucent enough to see the light churning beneath, shapes moving in patterns that made my eyes water. We stopped at the edge of the dome. The screaming sound was louder here, almost unbearable, and I could feel blood trickling from my left nostril. "The frequency!" I shouted over the noise. "It's stronger here!" Theo's face was pale, his jaw clenched against the pressure. "What's the plan?" I pulled the cylinder from its case. It blazed to life in my hand, threads of golden light spiraling outward to connect with the dome, with the ice, with the vast presence churning beneath. I go in, find the source, disrupt it, and I just wait here. You pull me out if something goes wrong. I grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at me. "Promise me, Theo, if I don't come back in 10 minutes, you get to the vehicle and you leave. You tell Whitford what happened. You make sure the world knows." "Elliot!" "Promise me." His eyes searched mine for a long moment, then he nodded once sharp. 10 minutes. I stepped onto the dome. The ice cracked beneath my weight, but held, barely. Each step sent fractures radiating outward, and the light from below pulsed brighter with every movement, as if responding to my approach. At the center of the dome, I stopped. The surface here was almost transparent, and I could see down into a shaft of impossible depth, filled with swirling luminescence and shapes that defied geometry. The awareness I'd felt in the containment chamber was overwhelming now, pressing against my mind with the weight of eons. I raised the cylinder and plunged it into the ice. The world exploded into light. I was falling, not physically but mentally, my consciousness pulled down through layers of ice and time into a space that existed outside normal reality. The geometric shapes were back, but different now, larger, more complex, interlocking in patterns that seemed to stretch toward infinity. And at the center of it all, waiting, was the source. It wasn't a creature, it wasn't a machine, it was something between a vast network of crystalline structures that pulsed with the same golden light as the threads from the cylinder, each node connected to countless others in a web that spanned the entire planet. "You came." The voice was the same as before, but stronger now, resonating through every cell of my body. "I came to stop you. You came to understand. The stopping was never possible. Only the choosing." The crystalline structures shifted, and I saw images reflected in their surfaces, humanity's history, compressed into moments. The first conversion, millions of years ago. The slow spread of the hybrid genetics across every population. The development of language, of culture, of civilization. All of it guided, shaped, nudged toward patterns that served the network's purpose. We did not conquer your ancestors, we saved them. Their species was dying, fragmented, purposeless, destined for extinction. We offered structure, meaning, survival. You offered control. Is there a difference? The structures pulsed, and I felt them reaching for me, not aggressively, but with something almost like affection. A parent welcoming home a wayward child. The 3% was an error. A fragment of the original substrate that resisted integration. For millions of years, it has caused complications, unpredictability, your species' capacity for violence, for irrationality, for destruction. These are symptoms of the error. The awakening will correct them. By removing what makes us human, by removing what makes you suffer. I thought about my father, walking out that morning and never coming back. The years of anger and confusion. The hole it left in me that never quite healed. I thought about Theo standing on the ice above, counting down the minutes. I thought about Walter Briggs laughing in the Antarctic sun, unaware of what was growing inside him. Suffering is part of being alive, I said. You can't remove it without removing everything else. We can. We have. Billions of converted beings across thousands of worlds, living in harmony, free from the chaos of uncorrected consciousness. You could join them. The error in your genetics could be corrected, and you would finally know peace. The offer hung in the space between us, shimmering with possibility. I could feel the network's sincerity. It genuinely believed it was offering salvation, and maybe, from its perspective, it was. But salvation without choice isn't salvation. It's just a different kind of prison. No, I said. The structures contracted, and I felt the network's disappointment like a physical weight. Then you leave us no choice. The awakening will proceed. Your species will be corrected. The error will be purged. Maybe. I gripped the cylinder tighter, feeling its warmth spread through my body. But not today. I reached inside myself, past the fear and the doubt, and found the thread that connected me to the 3%, the fragment of original humanity that had survived millions of years of conversion, passed down through countless generations to end up in me. And I pulled. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Golden light erupted from the cylinder, flooding the network space with energy that burned through the crystalline structures like acid. The awareness screamed, not in pain but in something like surprise, as its careful patterns dissolved into chaos. What are you doing? Choosing. I poured everything I had into the connection. I felt my cells dying, the original substrate burning away, replaced by converted tissue. The cost Aldrich had warned me about, paid all at once in a single devastating burst. But it was working. The network was destabilizing, its perfect geometric order collapsing into randomness. The awakening was failing, the conversion signal fragmenting into noise. You cannot stop us. We are eternal. We will return. Then we'll stop you again. The last of the 3% burned away, and I felt something inside me go dark. A light I'd never known I had, extinguished forever. But the network was falling. The crystalline structures shattered. The geometric space collapsed. And I was rising, shooting back up through the ice toward the surface, toward the cold and the wind and the screaming that was finally fading into silence. I broke through into darkness. Theo was there, his arms catching me as I collapsed onto the fractured ice. The dome was sinking, the glow beneath fading, the cracks sealing themselves as if the earth itself was healing. Elliot, talk to me. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't work. My body felt wrong, heavy and foreign, like wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. I stopped it, I managed finally. The awakening, it's over. At what cost? Theo's hands were on my face, checking for injuries. His fingers came away bloody from my nose, my ears, the corners of my eyes. What did you do? I thought about the 3%, the original humanity that had lived inside me, the error that had made me different, made me capable of connecting with the network and destroying it. It was gone now, all of it. I was baseline, the same as everyone else. 97% converted, 3% corrected. The prison door had closed, and I'd thrown away the key to save everyone else. What I had to, I whispered. Above us, the Antarctic sky was clearing. Stars emerged from behind the dissipating clouds, ancient light from ancient suns, indifferent to the small dramas playing out on the ice below. Theo pulled me close, his body warm against the cold, his heartbeat steady against my chest. "Let's go home," he said. I closed my eyes and let him carry me toward whatever came next. 6 months later, I stood on the observation deck of the Amundsen Scott station at the South Pole, watching the sun trace its endless summer circle along the horizon. The official story was a seismic event, a natural collapse of unstable ice formations that had damaged McMurdo and required temporary evacuation. 17 people died in the accident, their names added to the long list of those claimed by Antarctica's unforgiving environment. Brennan's body was never recovered. Whitford visited me once in the hospital in Christchurch, where I spent 3 weeks recovering from what the doctors called severe neurological trauma of unknown origin. He didn't say much, just sat beside my bed for an hour, watching the heart monitor beep its steady rhythm before leaving an envelope on the nightstand. Inside was a photograph, the original Polaroid of the 1999 drilling site, the one with the smeared figure in the background. Someone had written on the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, "Thank you." I never found out who. Theo stayed, through the hospital, through the debriefings, through the mandatory psychological evaluations that we both knew were really interrogations. He never asked what I'd lost down there in the ice, and I never tried to explain. Some things exist beyond language, in the spaces where words dissolve into feeling. We have an apartment now in Wellington, small with a view of the harbour. He teaches geophysics at the university. I consult for environmental agencies, analysing ice core data with an expertise that feels borrowed from someone I used to be. The dreams started about a month ago. They're not nightmares exactly. More like memories that don't belong to me. Flashes of crystalline structures and geometric patterns. Vast networks of light spanning distances I can't comprehend. Sometimes I see other worlds, other species, other versions of the conversion playing out across the galaxy. Billions of minds, all connected, all at peace, all waiting. I told the doctors about the dreams. They prescribed medication that I don't take, therapy sessions that I attend but don't engage with. They think I'm traumatized, and maybe they're right. But trauma doesn't explain the way my reflection sometimes looks wrong in mirrors, or the way I can feel Theo's heartbeat from across the room without touching him. The network said I would be corrected, that burning away the 3% would make me baseline, the same as everyone else. But I don't think that's what happened. Last week, I cut my finger while cooking dinner. The blood that welled up was red, perfectly normal, perfectly human. But for just a moment, before the wound closed faster than it should have, I saw something golden threading through the crimson. The same gold that had pulsed through the sample in containment. The same gold that had erupted from the cylinder when I made my choice. I think when I poured everything I had into destroying the network, something poured back. Not the conversion, something else. Something the network hadn't anticipated, born from the collision between what I was and what they tried to make me. The 3% is gone, but whatever I am now, it isn't baseline. Theo knows something is different. I see it in the way he watches me sometimes, when he thinks I'm not looking. The concern in his eyes, mixed with something that might be wonder or might be fear. He hasn't asked, not yet, but he will. And when he does, I'll tell him the truth. I don't know what I'm becoming. I only know that it's something new. Something that has never existed before. And somewhere deep beneath the Antarctic ice, in laboratories that have been running for millions of years, I think the machines are learning to dream of me too.